I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the first video of the Chapter 5 lore. I'll be splitting it up like I did with Chapter 4. The year is 984-05. The Great Lake, a body of water located to the south of the city. Districts 19, 20, 21 and 22 border this region. The part of the Great Lake that's under U-Corp's jurisdiction, within District 21, is populated by the floating habitations and ships. Both of these with humans in them. There are also mutant creatures that threaten both, and other less explainable phenomena. And the monsters that threaten all of those within the outskirts. A place where there is great overlap between the nest and the outskirts. A place of safety and a place of extreme peril. Somewhere within the Great Lake is the Lobotomy Corporation branch facility, where the next golden bar is located, where there's likely more abnormalities to deal with in there, and that's not considering the other issues to deal with, something more personal, for at least one of them. As during this mission, it will be Ishmael's turn to undergo a group therapy session in order to resonate with the golden bar and tie her up her loose ends. She certainly has noticeable PTSD from her past, based on how she was behaving in Chapter 4.5. She is usually the voice of reason for the Damned Dozen, and Heathcliff has been giving her a hard time. He owes her an apology. He and the others will learn the hard way that Ishmael was not exaggerating with her description of how dangerous the Great Lake was, as after waiting for clearance to proceed due to there being more red tape there than an entire department store's stock of gift wrapping, they were about to find out. Not long after the sirens and the green lights of Walpurgis Night had been turned off, for the time being, the Damned Dozen didn't consider heading back to their cabins to get some sleep. Faust was gazing out of the window for some time. She then came to her feet and approached the helm. This caught the attention of Virgilius. Faust was ahead of him, so he didn't need to ask her what was going on. They received the signal. Dante wanted to know what this meant. Yisang understood this as the long-awaited signal that had arrived, just as he was feeling nauseous. This excited Don Quixote, as it was finally time for their adventure in the Great Lake. Sinclair asked what this signal was, as there wasn't anything visible or audible alerting them to this. According to Faust, apparently U-Corp relies on something that certain tribes of Native Americans would use to communicate across vast distances. Smoke signals. They were being displayed outside of their visual range, but they were picked up by Mephistopheles. Gregor understood that the beacons were lit, which was what they were waiting for before they could proceed. Charon understood this as sailing is a go, splish, splash. Faust told them that they'd soon be moving away from the coastal area and get closer to the Great Lake approach. She then activated the automatic navigation system. This confused Don Quixote, asking if they weren't at the Great Lake. Faust then told her that, by strict definition, it was. They've been inside the Great Lakes borders for a while, but they've not been in the part of it that has any real threats compared to the Great Lake proper. Don Quixote was annoyed that after all they went through, they didn't encounter any real threats, likely referring to the trash crabs. Clearly those mutants aren't a threat compared to what they've yet to face there. Then she spoke of how on how Yi Sang, was vomiting in a bucket. Yi Sang didn't see this as a big deal. Don Quixote thought that the bucket was meant to remove water in case of flooding, not to hold the contents of Yi Sang's stomach. Then she mentioned Walpurgis Night, although Faust had to correct her bad pronunciation of it. Not many dangers that they encounter could be attributed to the dangers of the Great Lake. Massault saw this as false cause fallacy. Don Quixote saw these ideas as too much and too many for her, so she decided to go back to sleep. Ortis objected to this as they entered a hostile environment. They shouldn't sleep, and they should be ready for the dangers that they might encounter. Dante wanted to know what she meant by that. She ordered them to defensive stations, which surprised Gregor, along with Heathcliff, who was more irate. Gregor's heart was briefly affected, and Faust told Ortis that the ship was currently steered by an automatic navigation system, which will automatically avoid any threats that the Great Lake has. It will sound an alarm if a threat can't be avoided. Ortis didn't share her confidence in the incomprehensible contraption. The automatic navigation system was a slapdash last-minute installation by the Motor Boatworks fixers. Faust agreed that she can't be sure of its reliability, as she's not the one that installed it. Ortis saw it as well known that the path of a sailor is fraught with dangers unknown, so a human has to handle it. Don Quixote understood that Ortis would be the one to lead their vessel to victory. Ortis rose to the occasion as Dante unfortunately lacks any memories regarding sailing. Well, if Dante is who I suspect they are, it's unlikely that they've left their home districts, never mind sailed before. Ortis then revealed that she has experience with leadership. That doesn't inspire me with a lot of confidence, as I suspect that it ended badly, either due to carelessness on her part, some kind of disaster that wiped out those she was commanding, or some plots where she was made to take the fall. Because if things were still going well for her with whatever she was doing previously, she would still be working there, rather than with Limbus Company. Don Quixote referred to her as Commander. Ortis corrected her, telling her that she's their captain. She requested Dante that they briefly defer to her on this, so that she may lead this vessel as its temporary captain. She continued without awaiting Dante's reply. Ortis brought them to attention that sailing, the art of travelling across bodies of water, it took a while for her to give a full explanation of this, but we picked it back up when she concluded the fundamentals of sailing, asking if they've been taking notes. Charon was bored by the end of it. Don Quixote appreciated the knowledge that she was previously lacking. In fact, it was one of her humble 863 dreams to sail the Great Lake as an adventurer, like a challenger of storms, a queller of rogue waves. What's the other 862 then? I suspect that finding out what happened to Kali, the Red Mist, might be one of them. Which, if they get to the library in the outskirts, she might find out. Yi Sang noted the exact number of aspirations that she had. Sinclair had a question for Ortis. She allowed this. He asked what the complicated lever was. Ortis was unsure, although she didn't want to admit it. Don Quixote was unsure as well, asking what it did. She believed that it loaded a volley of cannonballs at the press of a button. Excited by this prospect, Yi Sang spoke of the lever as one of the transformative variety. It shall be an auspicious day in which they'll see it in action. Ortis was silent. Yeah, it's clear that she doesn't know what it did, yet she tried to pass herself off as one who knew, but didn't want to explain it. Sinclair was picking up on there being something wrong. She then spoke of this as a bleeding-edge technology. More of them have been appearing. Hollow inventions that have nothing to show for it, aside from pretty exteriors, seeing a blind pursuit of convenience as breeding increased risk, leading to nothing but ruin at the end of the road, paved with over-reliance on them. She relies more on the fervour fueled in the furnace of bolts and engine oil, the ship's blood and sweat. A combined force of the commanding officer's decisive leadership and their subordinates' firm loyalty. Dante didn't get what she was talking about. Ortis continued by saying that it's how proper workshops of tradition and history are supposed to run. How true comrades are born. Well, good luck finding them in your current employment, as you're around the emotionally maladjusted, the traumatized, and in at least one case, the bat insane. Although if your previous comrades are better, it doesn't sound like it's a huge margin as you're no longer with them. Sinclair was inspired by this, even though he didn't know what she was talking about. Don Quixote told the captain that the bleeding-edge technology was bleating like a mule, asking what they should do. Now, a reasonable person would ask someone that understood technology, or in this case, they'd ask Yi Sang or Faust. But Ortis is not a reasonable person. Certainly not in this case, as she decided to prove it to the world that she didn't need that high-tech junk to sail. She ordered Don Quixote to set the power lever to maximum outputs. Don Quixote executed this order, and Ortis ordered Sinclair to set the helm to the neutral position and hit the switch, which he also complied with. Ortis anticipated what would happen next. Then Yi Sang announced that the engine had fallen silent. Captain Ortis, here is your feedback on your performance so far. Faust told them that the automatic navigation system had failed. It was an old model. Rebooting it will be complete in approximately 5 hours. Charon told them that it's what they got for abandoning their bus driver. Dante asked if they were stuck there, sounding worried. Thankfully, Faust had a backup, as while the engine of Mephistopheles had been melded to the automatic navigation system, and if it's inactive, so is the engine, there was another way of making the ship move. They had a manually activated backup power system on standby. Sometime later, Ortis and the others were outside, seeing clear orders and solidarity are of paramount importance. in times like these, telling them right leg on heave and left leg on hoe, telling them to go. Otis shouting heave and Don Quixote happily shouting ho. Heathcliff he didn't see this as fair, as she's barking orders at them while they're peddling their bums off. Yeah, that's right. You heard me correctly. The backup power system involves exercise bikes connected to the engine, with them doing the pedaling. Well, it could be worse. They could be running on giant wheels like they're hamsters. Otis saw this as dim-witted. A captain must preserve their strength or risk putting subordinates in danger. It's why she's refraining from partaking in that collaborative effort herself. Dante didn't know what to make of this. Heathcliff asked her since when was she their new commander, and Dante correcting him by saying that she's the captain. Ryushu was annoyed by the seagulls that had rested on that ship that they were on, telling them to flock off already. Sorry Ryushu, you're not Bayonetta. You're lacking a skin-tight suit, demon summoning abilities, and the ability to pole dance. Then Heathcliff had an insane idea of kidnapping the seagulls and training them to pedal the generator. Don Quixote, embrace the moment. You're no longer the crazy one. He then told Faust, one of the geniuses of the damned dozen, to do as a certain Starfleet captain would put it, to make it so, seeing it as easy for her. Faust made it clear that she can make it happen, yet it's not something that she'll do. As for a start, she'd need to toilet train them to even begin to make them viable as a constant source of labour. Charon was bored at this time. She wanted to vroom. Ryushu wanted to tag out and make Charon pedal instead to keep her occupied. Rodia advised against that. Virgilius would not let that slide. Well, I can't blame Rodia for saying that, and she doesn't even know her background. In fact, this is what would get you a consultation. Roughly translated, make Charon, who used to be Lapis, pedal the bike, and Virgilius will deliver a lesson in pain. Gregor told them to think about that for a hot minute, asking why they're sweating and pedaling the out of the generator. Otis disapproved of the nitpicking and looking for another to take the fall for every little thing, seeing all that happens on the road to success is merely a part of the process. Gregor wasn't playing the, blame game. He was just wondering why they're pedaling so hard. It's not as if they have anything coming for them. I mean, they're heading towards one of the largest ports in District 21. They know where it is and how to get there. It's not as if it's going to sail away. Why the urgency? Faust knows better. Gregor asking if he's wrong. The Great Lake was tranquil so far. Monsters haven't suddenly appeared to attack them. Faust saw his consolidated field experience having evolved into a form of intuition, which confused Gregor. Faust then saw this development as optimistic, as they need to exit that area within 10 minutes. They're falling behind the forecast of her predictions. Gregor didn't like how ominous that sounded, asking why precisely 10 minutes. Faust replied that's due to the laws of the Great Lake. Rodier didn't like that. That's those laws again. Faust didn't expect her foreknowledge of the laws of the Great Lake, finding it difficult to believe even with her experience, her intuition. Rodier admitted that she just made that up, as she was trying to look good. She was getting tired about asking about it every time. Faust then told them that the Great Lake of Eucorp had laws that must never be broken. She also told Gregor that the port can and will sail away. Heathcliff didn't understand, as it was a bloody lake. What laws could it possibly have? Asking if the lake coppers are coming to spank the bad boys with a stick for breaking class rules. Okay, that's awfully specific, and out of context, that might be seen as something horrible. Miesha was getting irritated by Heathcliff, saying that there'd better be a law that lets her sink, or slice your neck clean, calling him a whiny brat. Her ears were starting to bleed. Perhaps some earplugs were in order, if it's that bad. Then someone told her to knock it off, and Dante noticed that Ishmael was nowhere to be seen on the deck. They were not... well... This reminded them that Ishmael said that if there was anything that they wanted from her from now on, to state it clearly. Since the incident on the mainland, she's been staying in her room despite all that was going on, not appearing once by her own volition. Yes, since the conflicts of interest in the mudflats, where they had the modifications done. Faust wanted to provide an explanation, but there was no time. They needed to leave that zone. Their last conversation left them 7 minutes. Mersault was determined that he determined rather that they're approximately 15 kilometers away from the edge of the zone. Each person needs to pedal to generate enough energy to travel at least 10 kilometers an hour, if they're to escape in time. Virgilius then decided to take the and saw this as wonderful. He wanted to see some proper teamwork for once. Ooh, is his opinion on them that low now? Don Quixote told Rocinante to gallop on. Their destination was ahead, pedaling excitedly. Rodier had far less energy to pedal. Gregor's death stick ruined lungs reduced his lung capacity, making pedaling harder to do sustainably, telling them to go on without him. Sinclair asked where should they leave him? They're on a ship. Mersault kept up the pace without complaints, seeing diaphragmatic breathing as conductive to maintaining consistent speed in an exercise of that intensity. Faust then told them that this is especially more so when each is responsible for about 10 kilometers an hour of energy output. Any higher would require hypernia to maintain that speed. Yeah. Best not do that unless it's urgent to do so. Thankfully, it's not that urgent. At least not how she appears to put it. Besides, if it was so bad that they collapsed and died, Dante would be able to reverse that. at the expense of their own pain. Rodia asks if Faust ever got tired. Faust says no. 3 minutes remain. Rodia doesn't even know what will happen in 3 minutes, asking why they're doing this. It was revealed that even Dante was peddling, telling them that there's no time to just step on it with her life. Charon complains that she wanted to vroom vroom. This was squeak squeak, seeing it as no fun. Honglu didn't know how energizing work songs could be. Roger still complained, asking how they have so much energy left. Honglu apparently has done more intense exercise, as he didn't consider this what he was doing a warm-up compared to what his family put him through with his training. The training that he was forced to do. Heathcliff told them to shut their gobs and pedal, Faust telling them that 30 seconds remained. Sinclair was struggling to keep pedaling, with the danger being near. Don Quixote was thrilled by this activity, comparing it to like charging an overwhelmingly colossal enemy. Yeah, and yet you still ran away from Baba Yaga in District 10. Because you knew you had no chance of winning. And then she coughed up something, possibly blood. Mesot telling her to save her words to maintain her breathing. Gregor was struggling to speak as he was trying to breathe, asking how much time. Faust answered 10 seconds remaining, and then said 4 seconds. Sinclair was annoyed by her not doing it in multiples of 5. Urtis telling them to toil with the peddling. They somehow managed to escape the zone before the countdown ran out. Some collapsed on the floor, others were more used to that kind of physical activity. Dante saw that they made it somehow. Gregor didn't see any sign of those laws, asking Faust if he was missing something. Heathcliff was annoyed, hoping that the law of the Great Lake wasn't something made up to make their journey go faster, implying that he's going to be violent if what they've been doing was not for good reasons. Then it was revealed in the previous zone that they were in what the laws of the Great Lake meant, as the waters changed from tranquil to blood red and filled with tentacles. Oh. Why, Project Moon? Why hentai? It's hard to know how large this was. Dante asked if this burst from the lake was a burst from the lake or something else. Were they travelling on its body that whole time without knowing it? This shocked Don Quixote. Dante lacked the words to describe what this was, as it sent waves across the waters all the way to the zone where it was comparatively safe. It shook Mephistopheles violently, and it also gave the sinners a saltwater shower. Rodia was relieved that they weren't panicked. Don Quixote saw no adventures complete without peril. Ryushu said NB, or no bother, seeing it as more like it. Mesot saw that they had no chance of withstanding a single strike from one of those tentacles. Virgilius told them that he was correct. They will leave them alone as long as they remain outside of the zone that has them. That is the law of the lake. I really hope this isn't you caught playing some giant Mario Party style game with the sailors moving around the Great Lake. Faust now had time for explanations. The laws of the Great Lake are numerous. She, however, would say only what was needed to them, lingering longer than the time that they should spend in a single zone of the Great Lake will cause one of the waves to hit them. Yes, they would be struck by the waves of each lake. Gregor didn't see what they saw as waves. Faust continued by saying that there are also laws governing the time and direction in which ships are permitted to cross the borders between lakes. Gregor understanding that if they stop for too long, the tentacles will attack them. Faust told them that everything on the Great Lake is in a constant state of motion to position itself according to the laws. The routes towards their destination will also change accordingly. Hongru asked if they could get a written list of these laws. His nanny used to stick a piece of paper with the family rules in his room. He couldn't follow them all, but... Then the door opened, and whoever did so was clearly irritated. It was Ishmael, and she clearly knew that the waves finally hit. Dante was surprised with her coming out of her room. Ishmael told them that they can't just write down the laws of the Great Lake on a notepad and call it a day. Each part of the Great Lake had wildly different sets of laws, even though overarching laws that govern the Great Lake were pretty straightforward. Anyway, it's a taboo of U-Corp to record the laws of the Great Lake without authorization, much like N-Corp has a taboo against recording video footage within District 14. Ryushu then suggested that they tattoo the laws onto their bodies. Faust told her that's also prohibited. U-Corp's taboo hunters have pursued individuals who attempted to do that, so they shouldn't write down anything about the laws. Yes, no written records of them. Dante then asked why Ishmael came out of her room. What has she been doing all this time? Ishmael answered by saying that she was wetting her harpoon. Dante asked why. Ishmael told them that it was to make it sharper, because she'll give her the kind of pain that makes her wish that she was dead. She'll feel it, even from the smallest cuts. Yes. I suspect what she's talking about. Heathcliff told her to spare them from her misery and crawl back into her hole. Heathcliff, you have your head in yours. She declined, as if she did, she might later emerge to a deck littered with their melted, unrecognisable flesh. She doesn't want to see that again. Besides, watching them waste time tinkering with a ship that they don't even understand, wasting precious time has become unbearable. Even though it's been a while since the incident at the boatworks, she's lost nothing. Dante was afraid that she might cause trouble for them again. Dante was also fine with her being out there with the rest of them. They wanted to believe that this was more than enough, and so didn't want to question her father about this. Ishmael had a feeling this would happen. She walked up to the helm. Urtis was alarmed by this. They're smooth sailing right now. A northbound breeze was pushing them along. Ishmael noted that it would look that way to those that are simple, one-dimensional, predictable ground pounders like her. Urtis took great offense to that. Dante telling her to hear her out, as she's the most experienced sailor of them. She backed down, but the annoyance was still there. Dante then asked why it wasn't smooth sailing. They had the wind on their backs. Ishmael corrected them by saying that it's no wind. they're being dragged. Dante wanted to know what they were being dragged by. Ishmael replied, "Those ships." And it's confirmed that each district has its own taboos, each specific to a particular district. Although there are taboos that apply to any part of the city, such as damaging residential areas. Although, why make unauthorized writing of the laws of the Great Lake illegal? I suspect that if they were all known, as in where the time and place for each wave would occur, and so could be put on a schedule, it would make it easier to know when to leave that area and escape the dangers when they do appear. Not to mention how to prepare for each wave that would occur, if and when needed. In a society that holds social Darwinism as the highest of virtues, having the dangers of the Great Lake in writing would be considered for the weak, where if they can't handle what's out there, they're clearly not worth much. There's also the fear to make sure that no one got any ideas to organise rebellion against Eucor. Basically, as long as the crime is kept outside of the sections of District 21 that's considered a nest, and is at an acceptable level to the wing in charge of District 21, as in Eucor, along with the profit keeps coming in and no one writes down the laws of the Great Lake, they couldn't care less about those that are underprepared for what's still considered the city. The parts of the Great Lake considered the outskirts are hinted at being worse than this. Much like any part of the outskirts, except in this case it has more water. Let's hope the damned does and don't find out how much worse. Also, considering that there's a clear separation between the red waters of hentai and the calm waters that they are sailing through now, I have a suspicion that the laws of the Great Lake and the waves aren't natural. That there's a degree of artificial segregation of the different parts of the water. Although it's hard to tell how this came to be. Whether it be due to Eucor, the head, or some other faction. Just as Ishmael told them, two massive vessels were, well, their ship was approaching them, and they weren't far from their location. They also had a set of 4 forks on them each. Dante didn't see what their problem was. They weren't exactly on a collision course with them. Ishmael clearly didn't have time to give an answer to this. She took the helm and threw it wildly in one direction, much to the surprise of Dante and Charon, the latter of which called this splashy drift. Yes, splashy drift. All that's missing is 1990s Eurowave. Gregor didn't know that ships could drift like a bus. This impressed Charon. Virgilia saw this as meaning that Charon had competition. Then Gregor was confused. Why the helm was turned all the way? Why were they still heading between those two ships? Sinclair compared it to being like they're stuck on rails. Dante saw the point. The helm was turned in the opposite direction of those ships. They were getting dragged even faster by them, and nothing could be done about it. Roger was annoyed by Ishmael, asking if they just hit the reverse gear. Ishmael told her that she turned the engine off. Roger didn't understand why. Honglu then noticed that the ships were merging into one another. Heathcliff thought that she was insane, as they're about to be squashed like bugs. Rutis was criticizing Ishmael, asking what happened to the bravado from Earl. Ishmael then cut her off at that point, shutting Rutis up. Ishmael was going to use the momentum of the pull when it's at its strongest to get them out of there, and Sinclair was scared that they're going to crash. She then said now, and the engine was revved before the crash, and they sped past the two vessels. They were able to make it past, but Sinclair noted that the back of the ship, their stern, was crushed. Well, better than getting completely sandwiched between the two ships. Thankfully, Faust told them that the engine of Mephistopheles can reconstruct damage of that severity within the next few days. Ah yes, self-repair. Handy to have, considering that some in the back streets want to bash their way in. We don't want their method of transportation to look like a wreck by the end of it. Gregor saw it as more than damage. It's like they've deleted a part of Mephistopheles. Yisang noted that it was gone, as if it had never been part of the ship's blueprint. Dante agreed with their statements, as it left a bizarre-looking cross-section behind. Ishmael told them that this was UCorp's singularity, and no, it's not preservation packaging, it's the resonance tuning fork. It can merge and separate ships operating in the Great Lake, if and when needed, as though they were always a single vessel, or as though they were truly separate. When the resonance tuning fork is used on vessels of that size, they're strong enough to pull in smaller boats that don't have them, or even ones with them that have mismatching wavelengths. She apologized to Dante for taking the helm without Dante's orders. Dante understood why she did that, as she saved their lives. Ishmael wasn't trying to, but she thanked them for their understanding. She also apologized for giving unsolicited advice, because a certain somebody wouldn't stop flapping her gums at her, so she had to. She couldn't plug her ears in the middle of a voyage. Eurytis was subdued by this, although she's heard her fair share of blunt, foul-mouthed talk during an unspecified war, so she's not the first to do so. But as long as she lives up to her words, no need to get in the way. She apologized to Dante. She needed to take a short break. Don Quixote tried to comfort her, for the captain to not be so crestfallen. Eurytis told her to shut up. Dante was their commanding officer, always had been. Eurytis was downcast and had her shoulders slumped. She went back to her cabin. Faust, in her typical dry and emotionless voice, then announced that they were nearing their destination. Their next destination being one of the 5 great ports of UCorp, the Marlin ports. Honglu was impressed by what appeared to him as one of the biggest ships he's ever seen. Dante noticed that it was so large it could be confused for an island, a megastructure built from countless metal shipping containers. Yisang then said, "Mist fades, and what was unseen before unveils itself." I scarcely did expect the pull to shroud a structure such as this. Gregor didn't consider what he was seeing as a ship at that point. Dante couldn't help but agree with him, asking if Ishmael could see that as counting as a ship. She told them that what they would see as common sense is useless in the Great Lake. Ships that use resonance tuning forks like those are as common as crimes are in the backstreets, or as common as the whales are in the Great Lake. I know, The voyage is getting chaotic and I doubt they've got to the worst part. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!